Whiskey finishing is a process that was first championed by the Balvenie in the 1980s, and it's effectively the main way a distillery can alter the flavor of a maturing cask. So they have a cask of whiskey, it's say 15 years old, and they want to play with the flavor a bit and see what they can do. What it means is you get your mature barrel of whiskey, so your 15-year-old barrel of whiskey, and you decant it from its existing barrel across into a new barrel, which basically used to have something else in it. So, for example, they get a cask or a barrel that used to have sherry, empty out the sherry, and then they pour the whiskey into it to effectively get some of that flavor profile in from the sherry. The reason this happens is that the oak will retain roughly 3% of the volume of the liquid anyway. So you're getting some of that sort of interplay of flavors. This, as I say, was really begun in the 1980s with the Balvenie, and the technical term would be secondary maturation. Since then, it's grown to be a hugely popular technique to play with the whiskey a bit and do something a bit more fun, you know, sort of alter the flavor profile somewhat. Particularly for smaller batch, sort of single cask releases, it's quite a good technique you can use to really make something quite interesting. Before they had this, so back in the, say, the 50s and 60s, certain distilleries still wanted to get that sherried sort of flavor profile. But before they had secondary maturation, what they do, say with sherry, is you just get your cask of aged whiskey, and rather than decanting it into anything else, you just empty in a bottle or two of sherry to give it that sherry flavor profile. Now, obviously, you can't really get away with that anymore. That's not a technique anyone's allowed to use. So instead, they use a secondary maturation finishing sort of technique. Sherry is very popular, and the vast majority of distilleries will use sherry to give that flavor sort of profile. However, you can be much more experimental than that. So an example would be Glenfiddich do an amazing rum finish. They've got a sort of rum finish sherry. A bunch of them are doing sort of red wine finishes. You can do quite a mix of different things. This process is absolutely key to what we are doing as a business, in that we are giving the control of that finishing process over to our membership so that they can become the whiskey maker and really play the integral role in the sort of production process itself. We've been able to get some incredible finishing cask options. So, for example, a Saint-Emilion Grand Cru Bordeaux Barrique is a very famous, very high-end red wine from Bordeaux. Alternatively, we're looking at some quite experimental options, sort of mezcal, for example. Other companies have taken this quite far. So, for example, I've heard of there being a sardine or even a Tabasco finished barrel, whereby they've used a Tabasco barrel to finish the whiskey. You'd have to assume that tastes really disgusting, but it kind of indicates the kind of range and stuff that you can actually do with the finishing. And yeah, as I say, please come and check us out and see what you think.